Alright everyone, welcome back. While I get this portrait started, let's dive into today's story. I'll give you the facts, the theories, and leave the decision up to you. Whether you agree with the guy or couldn't stand him, one thing's for certain, he was one of the biggest conservative voices in America. Millions of people knew who he was, and on the 10th of September 2025, that all came to a sudden end. Just after midday, Charlie Kirk was speaking at an outdoor event at Utah Valley University when a single shot rang out. He collapsed in front of thousands of people, and he was only 31 years old. The police say the shot came from the roof of a nearby university building around 140 yards away. And within days, investigators arrested 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, who was later charged with aggravated murder and other offences. Prosecutors have since said they'll seek the death penalty. Now, before we go any further, I want to make something clear. This video isn't about telling you what to believe. I'm going to go through what's being presented in court, what's being released by investigators, and then some questions and conspiracy theories that have been discussed by Charlie Kirk's supporters online. Some of those theories don't stand up to the available evidence. Other questions people still argue haven't been fully answered. So we'll get into all that later on, just bear with me. Charlie Kirk was born on the 14th of October 1993 near Chicago, Illinois. Even as a teenager, politics was what he wanted to do. He wrote articles, called into radio shows, and got involved in political debates long before most people his age were even thinking about voting. At just 18 years old, he co-founded Turning Point USA, an organisation aimed at promoting conservative ideas among students. Over the years, it grew into one of the most influential conservation youth organisations in the USA, with chapters across the country and support from major conservative donors. Charlie became a close ally of Donald Trump and a familiar face at conservative events. He hosted a daily radio show, wrote several best-selling books, and many people believed he had a future in elected politics. As a lot of you know, he was outspoken on just about every issue you can think of. He argued for smaller government, lower taxes, and fewer regulations. He strongly defended the Second Amendment and the right to own firearms. He opposed abortion, supported tighter immigration policies, criticised diversity, equity and inclusion programs, and regularly spoke out against what he called woke ideology and mainstream media bias. So because of that, he became one of the most diverse political figures in America. To his supporters, he was someone willing to say what others wouldn't. To his critics, he was deeply controversial and helped fuel potential diversion. Whichever side you were on, hardly anyone sat in the middle, and that's what makes what happened next such a huge story. So right, let's get into what actually happened. On the 10th of September 2025, Charlie Kirk was speaking at an outdoor event, Turning Point USA, at Utah Valley University. It was just after midday, students had gathered around, supporters were listening, and by all accounts it was a normal campaign-style event. Then at around 12:23 in the afternoon, one shot rang out. Charlie collapsed almost immediately. People in the crowd had no idea what was happening. Some froze, others ran for cover, while security and emergency crew rushed over to help him. Despite their efforts, Charlie died from his injuries. According to investigators, the shot came from the roof of the Lucy Centre, roughly 140 yards away from where Charlie had been speaking. As the police locked the campus down, officers started searching the surrounding buildings and gathering evidence. Over the next few days, investigators say they built a timeline of what happened. 3 days later, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson handed himself in to the police. Prosecutors say Robinson had planned the attack in advance. According to court documents, investigators recovered messages and notes in which Robinson allegedly wrote that he had been watching Charlie Kirk for years and believed he was spreading hate. Police say those writings became a key part of establishing motive. Investigators also linked Robinson to a Mauser 98 bolt-action rifle chambered in .30-06. The rifle was later recovered hidden under bushes not far from the university. Forensic investigators say Robinson's DNA was found on the rifle, the towel it was wrapped in, the screwdriver recovered from the rooftop, and other items connected to the scene. The medical examiner ruled Charlie's death a homicide after a single gunshot wound to the neck. One point that has been discussed online is the ballistics. Some people have claimed investigators couldn't match the bullet to the rifle. According to the evidence presented in court, the bullet fragmented after impact. Because the recovered pieces were badly damaged, examiners couldn't make a conclusive microscopic match to one specific rifle. That doesn't mean they concluded it came from a different gun. Investigators say the fragments were consistent with a .30-06 soft point ammunition and other evidence, including the recovered rifle and DNA evidence forms part of the prosecution's overall case. At the time of recording this, Robinson has pleaded not guilty and the case is still working its way through the courts. So that's the official version based on the evidence released so far. But as you'll know, if you've spent any time online, that's not where the story ends. Because almost from the moment Charlie was killed, supporters started asking questions. Some are straightforward, others have grown into full-blown conspiracy theories. Let's go through the biggest ones and just, as importantly, whatever evidence there is or isn't behind them. So, we're going to get into a few questions here and conspiracies. So, not because it's been proven that anything else has happened, but because Charlie's supporters reckon there's still things that doesn't sit right. The biggest one, the screwdriver. According to investigators, officers found a red and black flat screwdriver on the roof, close to where they believed the shooter had been lying. Police say Tyler Robinson's DNA was found on it, along with DNA from his long-term roommate and partner, Lance Twiggs, who's now expected to be a key witness for the prosecution. Now, here's what supporters keep asking. If the rifle's scope had been adjusted by hand, the rifle itself doesn't need a screwdriver to operate. Then why take one onto the roof in the first place? Investigators have suggested it may have been used to help gain access to the roof. Some supporters aren't convinced by the explanation and argue the purpose of the screwdriver still hasn't been fully explained. That doesn't prove anything was planted. It doesn't prove there was another person involved. But it's one of those details that keeps coming up whenever the case is discussed online. Another thing people point to is the ballistics. You've probably seen people saying they couldn't even match the bullet to the rifle. That sounds dramatic. What the forensic evidence actually says is the recovered bullet fragments were too damaged for a conclusive microscopic match to one individual rifle. Supporters who question the investigation argue that's a weakness in the prosecution's case. Investigators say it's exactly what you'd expect when an expanding hunting bullet breaks apart after impact. Then there's the microphone theory. You've probably heard about this one because it's been all over YouTube and all over social media. Some supporters have analysed the footage frame by frame and believe Charlie's clothing appears to move in a way they think looks unusual. They've zoomed right into his shirt frame by frame and they're looking at the way it changes just before he apparently gets shot. Some have speculated there was some kind of device hidden in or around the microphone equipment. Investigator says they examined the microphone, Charlie's clothing and the surrounding evidence and found nothing to support that theory. So at the moment there's no publicly released forensic evidence backing it up. Another question that gets asked about security. Investigators have said the event wasn't classified as a high risk under university policy, and court evidence indicates security personnel were diverted to deal with a reported medical emergency shortly before the shooting. Whether people think that was simply unfortunate timing or something that deserved more scrutiny is something that's still debated online. And then there's probably the biggest question of all. Supporters who doubt the official accounts sometimes argue Robinson was manipulated or that someone else was involved behind the scenes. At this stage, investigators say they have found no evidence of a second shooter or a wider conspiracy, and the prosecution's case is that Robinson acted alone. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with two very different pictures. One is the case prosecutors believe they can prove in court. The other is a collection of questions and theories that continue to circulate among some of Charlie Kirk's supporters because they don't believe every question has been fully answered. Whether those questions eventually lead anywhere is something only the evidence and the courts can decide. Right, this is the part of the story that splits people right down the middle. Everything up to now has mainly been about the evidence that's been released. From here on, we're talking about the theories that have been doing the rounds online since Charlie was killed. I'm not saying they're true, and I'm not saying that they're false. I'm saying these are the theories Charlie supporters still talk about. The first one is probably the biggest. Was Robinson really acting alone? The prosecution's case is simple. They say Robinson planned the attack, carried it out himself, and left more than enough evidence behind to link him to the scene. But not everyone buys that. Some supporters reckon there's no way one person could pull something like this off without someone else helping behind the scenes. They point to little things they think don't add up, like the screwdriver, the question around the roof access, and the timeline of events. So far though, investigators say they've found no evidence of a second shooter or anyone else being involved. The next theory centres around the media. Some supporters believe news organisations settled on the lone extremist narrative far too quickly. Their argument is simple. How did so many outlets sound so certain before the investigation had really got going? Others say that's just what happens during major breaking news stories, and that early reporting naturally changes as more evidence comes out. Then there's the question of the crime scene itself. Within days of the shooting, the area where Charlie collapsed had been repaired with new concrete and paving. Supporters have asked why work happened so quickly, especially before the trial had even started. Investigators say the entire scene had already been photographed, scanned and forensically examined before it was handed back to the university. Whether you think that explanation is enough is entirely up to you. Another theory that's gathered a lot of attention online is the idea that evidence has been deliberately withheld. Supporters often point to things like the full autopsy report, detailed forensic photographs, and complete ballistic documentation, arguing that releasing everything would answer many of the questions still being asked. But on the other hand, it's also common in major criminal cases for certain evidence to remain sealed while legal proceedings are ongoing. So the fact something hasn't been made public doesn't automatically mean there's a cover-up. And finally, there's probably the biggest reason these theories haven't disappeared. A lot of Charlie's supporters simply don't trust institutions anymore. They don't trust the media, they don't trust government agencies, and they don't trust every question has been answered. That doesn't prove there's a conspiracy, but it does explain why so many people continue looking for one. At the end of the day, there's a difference between asking a question and claiming you've already got the answers. This case is still going through the courts. Until that process is finished, people on both sides are likely to keep arguing over what really happened. So after everything we've gone through today, where does that actually leave us? Here's what we know from the evidence that's been made public. Investigators say Charlie Kirk died from a single gunshot wound after being shot while speaking at Utah Valley University. They say Tyler Robinson carried out the attack using a rifle, and that DNA, forensic evidence, and messages recovered during the investigation all pointed towards him acting alone. The prosecution believes the evidence is strong enough to secure a conviction. Supporters who accept the official investigation say that's the end of it. But supporters who don't accept it point to some areas we've spoken about today. The screwdriver, the microphone theory, the inconclusive ballistic match, the speed at which the crime scene was repaired, questions about security, and whether every piece of evidence that can be released has actually been released. Investigators say they have found no evidence of a second shooter, no hidden device, and nothing to support claims of wider conspiracies. Some supporters who remain sceptical say that's exactly what they'd expect officials to say if mistakes had been made or if there was more to the story. At the moment, those are two completely different interpretations of the same case. One is based on the prosecution's evidence. The other is based on unanswered questions and a lack of trust in the official explanation. Which one is right? Only the court can decide the criminal case. Whether that settles the debate online is another matter entirely. As more information comes out through the court process, people will keep comparing it against what they already believe. For now, we've got an official account backed by the prosecution's evidence, and we've got theories that continue to be discussed by some of Charlie's supporters. I've done my best to separate the two, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think this was exactly as investigators say? Or do you think there are still questions that deserve better answers? Facts are facts, theories are theories, and the truth matters. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.